Hello everyone, welcome once again to Scorpion Cigar Reviews. Today I'm with my friend Josh. It's alright we call you Josh? Okay. Today we have a couple nice treats. First off, we have the Amazon Basin. Now, there's actually a story that goes with the Amazon Basin cigar. This is made by CAO. Trying to think if you've had any CAOs with me.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think you have. But the story behind the Amazon Basin is way back in the day, like in the days of Christopher Columbus or something along those lines. I don't know the exact dates. But in the Amazon rainforest, out on some little island out in the river somewhere or whatever, there was this tobacco that grew on this very fertile soil. And it's a very rare tobacco leaf, and the way I understand it, only grows in that one spot. So, and then the other thing is, they only harvest it once every 3 years. So this is a very rare cigar. It only comes around about once every 3 years. And when they're gone until 3 years down the road. So, back in the day, they would go out to this island on these canoes or whatever, and they would take and harvest the tobacco leaves, and they would like weave them into like this long rope type of thing, just 30 yards long or whatever, and then they would wrap them around in these big spools, bring them back to the ship, put them in the hull of the ship, and then the 6 months or whatever it took to get back to England or whatever, it was fermenting and aging in the hull of this ship, and then they would then make the cigars from it. So to this very day, they take a canoe out to this spot in the Amazon River Basin in the rainforest, collect the tobacco, and instead of doing the traditional method of spreading the leaves out and stacking them up to cure them, not to cure them, to ferment them and to age them, that kind of thing, they make a rope much like this band, and they would wrap it around in a spool, and this band is to signify that. It's supposed to be the kind of the throwback to, hey, this is how we used to actually bring the tobacco across. And in fact, they still do. They loop it like that into a spool, bring it back and age it, and then they make these particular cigars out of it. So yeah, and that's once every 3 years they go out and they harvest these tobaccos. So it's kind of a cool little story to go behind the cigar. And that's where the name of the cigar comes from, is the Amazon Basin, because that's where it comes from. That's where the tobacco leaves come from. Now this is a 6x52 cigar, so it's your basic Toro size. I picked this up at my local tobacconist. It was just under $11 before tax and all that good stuff. And the wrapper is what they call a natural wrapper, and it is a Ecuadorian Sumatra wrapper. The binder is Nicaraguan, and the fillers, the one from the Amazon Basin is, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, Burkina, and the other fillers are from the Dominican Republic and Colombia. And this was made by Rick Rodriguez from General Cigars for CAO. Factory is in Nicaragua. All that good hubbub there. But anyway, so without any further ado, we'll get it opened up. Has almost a like a bronze undertone to the. It's very dark, but it's like there's a gold underneath it. Kind of reminds me of bronze. Firm pack. A little bit of cedar and maybe some almost yeasty, like a yeasty bread. Yeah. Picking up a little bit of that. Foot. Oh, that's interesting. What is that?
I'll say that's way different.
Yeah, I'm not sure what. Maybe some grains, some cereals, a little bit of cocoa. It kind of like a chocolate cake almost.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's a spice to it. It's got the little tingle on the nose.
Mm-hmm.
Some other stuff going on. There's actually a lot going on the foot. It's just with each snort, I get a little bit different. All right, so there's a lot going on. Seams look good. I mean, I can see them. They're fairly tight but visible. Some veins, nothing, no big deal. Nothing that's protruding or anything, but it's certainly not a silky smooth wrapper. No big deal. This band is really interesting. Now, being a tobacco leaf, if you're one to smoke it all the way down into the nub, you can just burn right on through that. It's a tobacco leaf, so you don't have to worry about trying to remove it or anything. Be curious to see how that's going to impact the flavor profile as it's burning through that wad of tobacco leaf. But, all right. So I'm going to use a guillotine cut. That's what I like to do. We can use the V cut. All right. That scent we couldn't pick out on the foot, it's carrying through to the pre-light draw. It's different, definitely different.
Recognize if I can't put my finger on what it is.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Man, I'm not sure what that is. I'm going to do a soft flame to get toasted up. So we'll get this toasted up and we'll be right back. So definitely a good blast of pepper. Like you said, there's some sweetness in there. There's a lot going on. Yeah, I'm picking up a ton of stuff. It's just slowly opening up with every draw. This is a very complex cigar, very complex. Well, that's good. That is real good stuff. Now we're pairing tonight's cigar with an Irish whiskey. It's called Teeling, and it's non-chill filtered, which means they didn't run it through to where they stripped out all the solids and everything. So when you add a little bit of water to it, it'll cloud up a little bit, and that's fine. There's flavor in that cloud. This is at 46%. Yeah, 46% alcohol by volume. And it was aged 6 months after they were done aging it the way they normally would with any Irish whiskey. Then they transferred it to rum casks, and they aged it for an additional 6 months in rum casks. I think I dripped. I don't want to ruin the finish. Let me set that down over there for now. And I'll get a coaster for it later. But anyway, I had some of this earlier tonight. I opened it up. So at 46%, it'll take a little bit of water. Pretty potent. It's real good. Smooth, even though it's potent. All right, so we're going to let the whiskey open up a little bit, and we're going to let the cigar heat up a little bit, and we'll come back somewhere in the first third. See you in a bit. So here we are about 20 minutes in. I've got maybe, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch of ash or something. I'm going to go ahead and tap it just to see. Okay, nice chunk. Wouldn't want it to go much further than it did. Looked like it was starting to crack all the way around, so, you know, no big deal, whatever. But there's just such a wide range of flavors in this.
It's a lot.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, it's no one flavor that I'm picking out is unique to this cigar, but the combination of all the flavors could very well be unique. I mean, I've tasted every one of these flavors, but not necessarily all at the same time on the same cigar. You know, on the same cigar. Yeah, just very rich. There's just so much going on. It's so complex. The flavors aren't necessarily bound, but there's just so many right in one spot that it's kind of like overloading the palate, and it's hard to pick out each one. You can pick one out for just long enough to say, man, I recognize that, but you can't quite pinpoint it.
Like I said, it's just all at once and it's like quick hits.
Yeah, and they're so good. I'm not picking up any kind of, you know, there's nothing off. There's nothing detrimental to it. You know, sometimes you'll get a cigar where there's a lot of good flavors, but there's something in the back that isn't necessarily a bad flavor, but maybe you don't like it. Like, for example, if you didn't like cedar, but there was a slight cedar note, you could say, yeah, it's got all this other stuff I like, but I don't care for cedar. I'm not getting any of that from this.
Right,
all the flavors I'm getting are all very, what's the word I'm looking for? They're, you know, all the flavors that you would look for in a cigar, all the flavors you would want a cigar to have.
Say they're very cohesive. Like there's no mix of flavors in here where you're like, well, these would probably be all right separated, but together they don't work that well.
Right. Yeah, I'm not getting that with this. They're all, yeah, like I said, they're very cohesive. They're blending very well. Every once in a while, I think I'm picking up just a slight bit of that kind of barnyard character. Very subtle. I have picked up a little bit of that cedar. Well, once again, very subtle. And that's the other thing. Nothing is like really powerful and in your face and knocking you out. Not one flavor overpowers another flavor. They're all just kind of, they're just kind of doing one of these things, like the waves, lightly lapping, lightly lapping up on the beach, kind of thing. You know, just they're just kind of going kind of back and forth, you know, and they're just. Yeah, this is pretty awesome. I love this cigar. Yeah, there's definitely some barnyard in there. I'm picking up stuff like horse farm type of thing. Not necessarily, you know, the ammonia from the urine and that kind of thing, but the other things that go along with horse farms, like the tack room and the cedar shavings and a little bit of hay in there and you know, the horses themselves have an odor, and it's a thick odor. You can taste it. Like when you breathe around a horse, you can taste what's going on with the horse. That's not a bad thing, you know. And it's funny because I've had people leave comments on some of my videos like, "Oh my God, if I ever had that in a cigar, it'd go right in the garbage." Well, okay, you can't look at it like that. It's nothing offensive, and if you've never been around a horse, you wouldn't know what it was. You're like, yeah, I have no idea what it is. It's, you know, whatever it is, but it's there. I don't know what it is. But I've been around horses, so I'm definitely picking up a horse note.
And there is some kind of spice in there. I can taste it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm also picking up some like a baker's cocoa, that kind of dry, unsweetened.
And I don't know if it's just the way the spice is working with the pepper, but I almost want to say it's like cinnamon.
Could very well be, yes. Yeah, because it's a dry spice, like, and cinnamon's very dry.
Kind of like that, the beginning taste of like a hot tamale or those little red hots.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just the beginning of it though, right when it first hits your tongue.
Right. All right. Well, we'll continue smoking this. We'll come back somewhere in the second, third. So here we are, about 40 minutes, 45 minutes in. Picking up some sweet tobacco, spice, and there's a hay note. It's kind of not really bitter, not really sour, but there's that hay note. So if we break this, if we break a single draw down into three parts, the arrival, the development, and the finish. The sweetness, I would say, would be a floral arrival. I think we agreed on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was picking up something almost like a grilled, spiced meat, a lot of seasonings on the development, and then it finishes kind of a dry, woody character. Yeah. The smoke's a little dry too. It's requiring that you have something to drink with it because it's a little dry. It's not to the point where it gags you. I've had cigars that were just so dry you couldn't quench your thirst while you're smoking, and that's not the case with this. Something a little bit sweet, like the alcohol helps. There's a little bit of sweetness on the alcohol itself that helps to counter that. This cigar is checking all the boxes. It really is.
Mm-hmm. Like you said, it wasn't, or it's not as complex now as it was when we first started smoking
Right.
it. But
That
it's,
first third was just, we were being bombarded with flavors.
it's still got a lot going on though.
Yeah, definitely. And this Teeling Irish whiskey is really going well with this cigar.
Oh yeah.
It a little bit of sweetness from the alcohol is helping to combat any dryness in the cigar.
Mm-hmm.
And the spice note that's in the Irish whiskey is complementing the spice in the cigar. And then there's also a little bit of a citrus quality to the whiskey,
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily grapefruit, but like a drier citrus along those lines. Not sweet like an orange, but there's a citrus note there that's a little bit dry. Maybe slightly smoky. You get a little bit of smoke off this. This may sound strange to you, but nosing this whiskey, I'm reminded of a circus.
Circus.
Yeah, not, there's a sweetness in the air at a circus.
Kind of like the cotton candy and kettle corn.
Yeah, that mixing with the sense from the animals and all that, and the hay and everything that surrounds a circus. It's subtle, but it's, yeah, I mean, it reminds me of just walking through a circus tent. Not real strong, not real forward. It's very subtle.
Mm-hmm.
Just the right amount of sweetness. A sweet arrival. A little bit of leather in there maybe. On the finish, yeah, definitely a leather on the finish. For me. And it's definitely complementing the cigar. Very good pairing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll continue smoking this. We'll come back somewhere in the final third. So here we are, just over an hour in, picking up some kind of earthy mineral flavors. For me, I'm getting almost along that mineral note, a little bit of salt, not like table salt, but more like rock salt.
I'm definitely still getting that smokiness. Keep tasting those greens.
That woody note is still there.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a woody finish. And this whiskey, it's very Irish. Like there are, for example, some bourbons. Some are more bourbon-esque than others. Like for me, a bourbon would be it would have that corn sweetness, some vanilla, some oak, that kind of thing. And for me, an Irish whiskey, it's a totally different animal. And this is very indicative of your typical Irish whiskey. But there's a little bit of spice on there that I don't normally get from Irish whiskeys. And it's being finished in a rum cask. It does add another dimension to it. A little bit of sweetness. Yeah, definitely a little bit different. Rum being made from sugar cane. So that's where the sweet note's coming from this, I believe.
I'd say definitely sweet. I definitely get a lot of spice out of it.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's a lot of spice on that. I would attribute that to the casks. Oak, in addition to it bringing vanilla and the wood and that kind of thing, there's a spice to. Some oaks have more spice than others, and this is definitely getting spice from the casks. Yeah, it's definitely a well-balanced, very well-rounded cigar. And we were talking a moment ago about the different, like the oiliness on the cigar, and how as it's heating up, it's becoming more oily. I can see on mine as the light's hitting it, between the band and the burn line, it's very shiny and oily looking. It's dark. It looks like somebody took a little paintbrush, dipped in oil, and just went all the way around. It's very oily looking. There's going to be a lot of flavors from that oil. Definitely a good cigar, very well balanced, perfect, flawless construction. I haven't had any trouble with it, trying to unravel, or even where I made the cut. I'm not getting a lot of like little bits of tobacco sticking to my lip and that kind of thing. So it's the construction is flawless on this.
Yep, burns perfect.
Yeah. Well, you had to touch yours up a little bit.
A little bit.
I haven't touched mine up at all. It's not a perfect burn line. It's not perfectly straight, but it's a crisp burn line. It's a little bit wavy, but it's a very defined. The ash isn't like flaky and flowering off. It does. It breaks off in nice like half-inch, 3/4-inch chunks. You're not gonna get one of those long ash contests with this cigar. I'd imagine the ash is probably fairly heavy. Yeah, because ash feels heavy. So it would just its own weight, it would break off. So yeah, you wouldn't want to try to see if you can get 4 inches of ash out of this thing. It's not going to happen. You're going to be wearing it after about 1.5 inches. I will continue smoking this. We'll come back in the nub with our final thoughts and impressions and a score. See you in a bit. So we're in the nub, just about an hour and a half in. I'm at that band that's where they've taken the leaf and they've twisted into a rope and wrapped it around to symbolize the way that they get the tobaccos, where they do it in a rope and then put it in a spool. And it's actually kind of impeding the burn a bit for me. I had to, for the first time, I've had to touch it up. It kind of choked it off. It stalled out when it got to that tobacco band. Probably because it's such a tight roll, it doesn't burn as well. But once I touched it up, it's burning just fine now. And those oils are now south of that band. Whereas as it was burning up to it, the oils would like stop at that band. And now that I've had to light at the band, they're coming on past it. But the smoke had become kind of thin and it wasn't really burning real well. Weren't much flavors to pick out, but now I'm getting some cedar, some earth, minerals. Lost my pencil again. Here it is. Light, getting cedar, earth, minerals. A little bit of floral, slightly floral yet on the arrival. Much like how it was in the second third is what I'm getting now. Probably deduct a 1/2 point because the band impeded the burn.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's starting to get hot. So that band was definitely holding back the heat. Getting some of that cinnamon. It's definitely spicy. Alright, so we've been smoking these cigars for about an hour and 45 minutes, something like that. We've burned past the band that where they took the leaf, rolled it up to like a rope and wrapped it around. And I deducted 1/2 point because you did too. Because once it got to that leaf band, it didn't want to burn. Just because of the sudden addition of a tightly rolled tobacco leaf, it didn't want to catch. But once it was relit and it burned through that, the flavors really popped again for me. Did they pop for you? I mean,
Well, I haven't made it past the band yet, but
okay.
I'm sure that it will.
Okay. So, with the 1/2 point deduction for me, strictly based on that band didn't burn. My overall score after that half-point deduction, I gave this cigar 95 out of 100 points, which is, if it's not my highest score, it's my second highest score. I don't remember if I've given, I almost want to say it was a 96 was the highest score I ever gave on a cigar. And without going back and looking at all my past score sheets, I couldn't tell you exactly. Yeah, this ranks up among the top 2 cigars I've ever smoked, definitely. And part of that, I'm sure, was influenced by the history and the story behind the cigar. And that's fine to include that in your overall impressions of a cigar. Whenever there's a story to tell, that just adds that extra dimension. So yeah, 95 points for me. And definitely Scorpion recommended for me. Paired very nicely with the Teeling Irish whiskey, with its spice and citrus note and a little bit of sweetness in there from the rum cask and the addition of the rum cask aging. I think they both went very well together, and yeah, so definitely a good solid 95 points for me. And you scored yours much less, but as I mentioned off camera, this sheet's a learning curve.
Yep.
If you were to use this sheet on the next 10 or 12 cigars you smoked, you'll find your scores probably coming up quite a bit, back probably up into the upper 80s, lower 90s. And then if you were to revisit this cigar down the road, say when they come back again in 3 years, and if you've been doing these sheets off and on over 3 years, I can just about guarantee next time you smoke the cigar and do a sheet, you'll probably be, maybe not 95, but you'll be along these lines. It's a learning curve.
Yeah, I was going to say, definitely could have been more generous with some of these scores, but like I said, learning curve. Definitely should be somewhere in the 90s. This is a good damn cigar.
Now, of the cigars that you smoked with me, how does this rank compared to the other ones?
Definitely top 3.
Top 3.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. For me, this is like I said, probably the top 2 or something cigars I've ever smoked. So it's not all hype, as is often the case when they'll hype up a cigar. They'll give some kind of bogus story behind it or whatever, or they'll really ramp it up in the advertising and that kind of thing, and it'll maybe score really well in some of the publications, but they're biased. I give honest first-time impressions. I've never smoked this cigar before. This is the very first time I've ever smoked it. So this is a first impression for me. And that's how I really like to do my cigar reviews. Because if you've never smoked that cigar before, and the first time you smoke that cigar, if it didn't really sit with you well, the chances that you're going to buy the cigar again are pretty slim. If it was a phenomenal cigar, you're like, man, I'm going to buy a 5-pack of these, or I'm going to buy a box of these, or whatever. And then if it's somewhere kind of in the middle, where you say, well, maybe I'll give it another try some other time. Maybe it just didn't hit me right. But first smoking of this cigar, first time I've ever had this cigar, very pleased. I'm impressed. Just a plethora of flavors. Aside from the story behind it, just the fact that there's just so many flavors there, and they're good flavors, and they blended well together. Everything from the barnyard, the different like horse farm flavors, the hay, the tack room, the molasses grains, different cereals, different grasses, and then it had like a tobacco sweetness. It had nice mineral note, a nice earthy note, lots of spice. A little bit of saltiness for me, like a rock salt, not a table salt, but a rock salt, a very mineral type salt. A little bit of a floral note on the arrival, a woody finish. Just such a wide range of flavor. Just a great profile on the palate, just phenomenal for me. So yeah, this is a very, very good cigar, well worth about $11. It's not an everyday smoke, but at $11 for many people, that's not outrageous.
I'd say that to smoke a cigar that has probably more flavors than you'd get maybe 2 or 3 separate cigars.
Right, all mixed in one,
Mm-hmm.
and they go well together.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. So there you have it. There's my review of the CAO Amazon Basin. Smoking with my friend Josh.
Thank you for having me.
Glad you're here. Catch you next time. Another flavor. They're all just kind of, they're just kind of doing one of these things, like the waves, lightly lapping, lightly lapping up on the beach, kind of thing. You know, just
Right.
they're just kind of going kind of back and forth, you know, and they're just